I was going to say, please be seated.
You can be seated. Please be seated. You never know what I'm going to do up here. So, I was reading a story about a guy by the name of Michael, and he had a wonderful personality and he had a wonderful disposition on life. And just about anything that happened to him, he was positive about. It didn't matter what it was. He had a choice to be positive. As a matter of fact, that was his secret. He's the kind of guy that just simply said, if I were any better, when asked, how are you doing? He said, I would be twins. That's just the kind of attitude he had. Seeing his style just made this guy really curious, the guy that's writing the story. He said, one day I went up to Michael and said, I don't get it. I don't understand. How in the world can you be such a positive person, especially in this world? Michael replied, each morning I wake up and I say to myself, you have two choices today. You can choose to be in a good mood or you can choose to be in a bad mood. I choose to be in a good mood. Each time something happens, I can choose to be a victim or I can choose to learn from it. And he just simply said, I choose to learn from it. He says, every time someone comes to me complaining, I can choose to accept their complaining, or I can point out the positive side of life. I choose to point out the positive side of life. And he just simply said, the guy that's writing the story said, yeah, right, it's not that easy, is it? And Michael said, yes, it really is. Life is about choices. When you cut away all the junk, every situation is a choice. You choose how you react to situations. You choose how people will affect your mood. You choose to be in a good mood or a bad mood. The bottom line is just simply this. It is your choice how you live life. I reflected on what Michael had said, and then this author writes, it's been several years and Michael and I have lost touch. And then I heard that Michael had fallen off of a communications tower and had surgery. And he was in surgery for 18 hours and weeks in intensive care. Finally, Michael was released from the hospital with rods placed in his back and his neck. He said, I saw Mike about 6 months after the accident. And when I saw Mike, I just simply asked, hey, how are you doing? And he said, if I were any better, I'd be twins. He just simply asked, weren't you scared when you fell off the communications tower and you were in the hospital? And Michael just simply replied, he said, well, I did lose consciousness, but the paramedics were great. They were wonderful. They kept telling me I was going to be fine. I'm going to be fine. You're going to be okay. When they wheeled me into the ER room, and I saw the expressions on the faces of the doctors and the nurses, I got really scared. In their eyes, stated, he's a dead man. I knew I needed to take action. He said, Michael said, there was a big burly nurse standing over him and just simply rambling on about all the questions that nurses ask. He says, are you allergic to anything? Are you this and that? And the allergic one really stood out to him. And he says, yes, I'm allergic to gravity. The doctors, the nurses, they began to laugh. They began to relax a little bit. Not necessarily because of his condition, but because of his outlook on life. Over their laughter, he just simply chose to yell out loud, I am choosing to live. I'm choosing to live. I'm choosing to live. And he made this statement out loud as well as just with those 3 statements. He said, operate on me as if I'm going to live. Operate on me as if I'm alive and not dead. Michael lived, of course, he told the story, not just because of due to the skills of the doctors, but because of his amazing attitude. And the author said, I learned from him that every day we have a choice to fully live. We have a choice to be positive or to be negative. We have a choice on how we react to people or not react to people. We have a choice to do good, not to just folks who has done good to us, but to live the golden rule, to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That is a proactive choice. That is a proactive lifestyle. It's just not as people have done to you, but you do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You do it first, because that's the type of Father we have. And if you take a look at that, we'll take a look at the flow of the Sermon on the Mount. But all the way through, Jesus is leading up to a point. And that point is just simply this, and it's what preachers do all the time. We lead up to a point that you have to make a choice. You have to make a decision. Given the information, whether the information was given poorly or not, you have to make a choice on the information given to you. Because you and you alone will be held accountable for it. This church won't be held accountable. Individuals in the church will be held accountable. I will be held accountable for what I know and how I act and react. So, there are several preachers that preach on this, all right? And you know these preachers as well as I do, that life is full of choices. And these preachers, they start way back when. They start with Moses, all right? And you know Moses, he had some struggles and he had some ups and downs, and not everything that he said was eloquent. Matter of fact, he tried to bargain and barter with God. Don't send me. The last time he said is, I'm not eloquent. I can't do it. And then Aaron comes walking down and says, look, I brought Aaron along here. He'll go with you, but you're doing it. All right. He does this, and he goes back and forth with the Israelites and his quote-unquote ministry, I guess you could say, to the Israelites, is with the people there, being a spokesman for God to the people. This is what God expects. This is what God wants. With the ups and flows and downs, with all of the, I'm thirsty. Why doesn't God care about me? I'm hungry. Why doesn't God care about me? He strikes the rock and water comes out that gives quail and manna as it comes out their nose. And anyway, all the struggles with the Israelites, and it boils down to Deuteronomy chapter 30, all right? And he comes up with he doesn't come up, God gives it to him. And I had to put it on my favorite print, large print. So, and this is what he says to the Israelites. And this is right before Moses he's not going to enter into Canaan land. And it's basically almost a speech to pass on the torch to who? Joshua. Passing on the torch to Joshua. And he says, look, you have been given all the information that you need to make a wise choice. And this is what he says. And we'll read 11 through 20. For this commandment that I command you today is not hard for you, neither is it far off. It is not in heaven, that you should say, who will ascend in heaven for us and bring it to us, that we may hear it and do it? Neither is it beyond the sea, that you should say, who will go over the sea for us and bring it to us, that we may hear it and do it? But the word of the Lord is near you. It is in your mouth. It is in your heart, so you can do it. This is the Old Testament speaking. It's in your heart. Verse 15, see, I have set before you life and good, death and evil. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God, I command you today, by loving the Lord your God, by walking in his ways and keeping his commandments and his statutes and his rules, then you shall live and multiply. And the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are entering to take possession of it. But if your heart turns away and you will not hear, but are drawn away to worship other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you shall surely perish. You shall not live long in the land, and you are going over the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. He's done this before too when he gave the 10 Commandments. Middle of verse 19. Therefore choose life, that you and your offspring may live. Can you hear it? Can you hear the pleading? Choose life, guys. Choose life. Not just for you, but for your children and your children's children and your children's children. Choose this life that I'm offering to you. How? Loving the Lord your God, obeying his voice, and holding fast to him. For he is your life and length of days, that you may dwell in the land that the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give them. Can you hear that? Wouldn't you like to be in that sermon and you hear Moses speak these very words? Or maybe you hear a sermon, maybe either from me or from Eric or from somebody else that you listen to, and you come all the way down, and it's systematically, it's been given a reason, and it comes down to the end and saying, choose life. Choose to walk with Jesus. Choose to do the things that he's done. Choose to live by the Holy Spirit, to keep in step with the Holy Spirit. Don't choose the world. Don't choose the negative things. Choose the positive things. Because in this world, it's nothing. It's just a vapor. And we'll be gone in a heartbeat. Can you hear James say that? Yeah, you listen to these preachers and they encourage you to make a decision to follow willfully, to surrender and to serve. Joshua does the same thing near the end of his life. He says this in Joshua 24, 14 and 15. He says, now therefore, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your forefathers served in the region beyond the river, of the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, what? We will serve the Lord. We will serve the Lord. You've got to make a decision, and you've got to stick to that decision, and you've got to move with that decision. And if you have made a bad decision, you don't have to stick to that decision. Change that decision and follow the Lord in love and faith and hope and everything that you have within you. You know the story as well as I do. The next one on here is Elijah. What story do you think I'm going to go to? 1 Kings chapter 18. He faces 450 Baal prophets. I love this story. I love this story. When Elijah is coming up, he sees Obadiah is sent out. Obadiah falls down, kneels before Elijah, and then Elijah tells him to go back. And as they go back, and Elijah comes to the king Ahab, it says what? Is that you, you troublemaker of Israel? Now, none of you have said that to me yet. All right? Hopefully I'm not a troublemaker. But here he is, standing before Ahab, and standing before the 450 Baal prophets. And he's standing before all of Israel who have apostated themselves, I guess you could say. They've abandoned God and started following the prophets of Baal. And he stands and he delivers this to them in verses 20 and 21. All right, so just go to verse 21. And Elijah came near to all the people and said, how long will you go limping between two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. And then he gives a powerful sermon illustration, right? So, you can hear it. You can hear it all the way through. Who are you going to follow? Who are you going to listen to? Who are you going to give your attention and your allegiance to? And mankind is so fickle, it's unreal. Mankind likes, including myself, likes to see the things of this world. We like to see the flash and the bang and the theatrics and the productions. And that's what we'll give our heart to. Be careful that the world doesn't capture your attention so much that you give everything that you are to the world. Joel chapter 3. Here's a powerful preacher. Now I know Joel chapter 3. Some preachers use this as a invitation. This scene is judgment. This scene is judgment. This scene isn't for me to necessarily say to you, you got to make a decision. In the valley of Jehoshaphat, in the valley of decision, you've got to make a decision. Who you will serve, who you will listen to, who you will pay allegiance to. This scenario here is judgment. And they've already made their choice. And this is God. It's over. We have just, as far as Matthew 25 is concerned, we have just separated the sheep and the goats. And this is what God says to them. Now, I got to believe it's written in the Bible to persuade the Israelites and ourselves as well to make decisions. To make decisions on what reflects Christ in us. Okay? So listen to what he says. In verse 9, we won't read all of it, but verse 9. Proclaim this among the nations. Consecrate for war. Stir up the mighty men. Let all the men of war draw near. Let them come. Beat your plowshares into swords. In other words, in our terminology, he's saying, bring it on. And your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am a warrior. Hasten and come, all you surrounding nations, and gather yourselves there. Bring down your warriors, O Lord. Let the nations stir themselves up and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat. For there I will sit to judge all the surrounding nations. Put in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Go in, tread, for the ripeness is full. The vats overflow, for their evil is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision. For the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. The sun and the moon are darkened, and the stars withdraw their shining. The Lord roars from Zion and utters his voice from Jerusalem, and the heavens and the earth quake. But the Lord is a refuge to the people, a stronghold to the people of Israel. What a sermon. What an invitation. What a way to think. Whose side do I want to be on? I think it's ego talking when we walk away thinking God's on my side. Yeah, that's huge ego. You need to be on God's side. You need to be on God's side. So, those are just a few the Old Testament. Jesus, he does the same thing as well. When he delivers messages and he talks to the people and he looks them straight in the eye. How about Luke chapter 9? All right? And somebody cries out and says, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus says, oh, but the foxes have what? Holes, and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. And then Jesus turns and looks and says, follow me. And what does he say? Let me first go and bury my father. And he says, let the dead bury the dead. You got to make a decision. How committed do you want to be? That's what Jesus is saying. How committed do you want to be to following Jesus? Luke chapter 14 as well. he does the same thing. And he's looking at his disciples. He says, look, if you want to be my disciples, you must what? Hate somebody. Mother, father, children, brothers, sisters. If you don't do that, you cannot be my disciple. Now that term hate is love less, all right? It's not an angry, envious hate. It's love less. You've got to put Jesus first. That's what he's saying. You've got to put me first in life. Matthew chapter 16, he's talking to his disciples, and he just simply asks them, who do people say that I am? And they respond. Some say Elijah. Some say one of the prophets, or John the Baptist, or one of the prophets. And then he turns and he looks at them individually. I see this individually, and he says, but who do you say that I am? You see, he can look at King's Orchard and say, well, what's your mission statement? It doesn't matter what your mission. You're not going to be able to quote the mission statement of King's Orchard. You're going to have to say who Jesus is to Jesus when he asks you that question. And Jesus, man, that's a powerful invitation for his disciples. And Peter speaks up and says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus says, blessed are you, Simon Peter, for this is not revealed to you by man, but by my Father in heaven. Powerful, folks. Powerful. Jesus knows how to draw it and make a conviction out of it. Okay? And we can look at several things as well. How about Peter? Peter does that as well. He comes down and he gives a great sermon in Acts chapter 2. And at the end of the sermon, he says, this Jesus whom you crucified, God has made both Lord and Christ. Uh-oh. And then the people were pricked in the heart. What must we do to be saved? They do the same thing as well to the Sanhedrin court. When they're brought to the Sanhedrin court, they say, we must obey what? God. Or who? We must obey God rather than man. And all the way through, they're making conclusions and they're telling people, this is where we stand and this is where we want you to stand as well. They make awesome invitations. And we could go on, Paul as well. So, Sermon on the Mount. You have lots of choices. You thumb through the Sermon on the Mount. What does it start off with? Blessed are, what do we call those? You start off with the Beatitudes. You have a choice. You have a choice to give attention to the Beatitudes that Christ calls us to. You have a choice to be the light or not. If you follow Jesus, you don't have the choice to be the light. You are the light, but you have a choice to follow Jesus. You have a choice to love your neighbors and pray for those who persecute you. You have a choice to do good or to do bad. You have a choice to have integrity, to let your yes be yes, your no be no. You have a choice all the way through. You have a choice how your marriage is going to be, as far as it is on you. You have a choice all the way through. And then he comes up to the last four statements. We're just talking about the first of the last one. In verses 13 and 14. Well, let's back up just a little bit. How about chapter 7? You have a choice to be critical or not. You have a choice to do good to everybody or not. As reflective as who your Father is. You be like your Father. Jesus says in another place, you be holy as I am holy. You be complete. You love everybody. That's a tall challenge. That is a very tall challenge. Everything that Jesus says to his disciples, he's looking at his disciples right at them. And he says, look, I realize I realize all of these things that I am asking you to do, telling you to do, is very narrow. Not narrow-minded, by the way, but the path and the gate is narrow. All these other ways, all these other religions, by the way, that's basically what he's talking about. Religion is not going to cut it. A relationship with Christ is. He's talking about having a relationship with him all the way through. And he's talking about religious ceremony, religious actions, as if you can earn your way to heaven. Religion doesn't work. Christianity, a relationship with Christ, works. Okay? And he's saying that all the way through. And it's a narrow pathway. When everybody else wants to do all of these other things, including the way they interpreted the law, Judaism interpreted the law, the Sanhedrin court interpreted the law, it's not the way that it was given or intended. And all these other religions as well. You can't work and earn your way to what is heaven, nirvana, or whatever you want to call it. When Jesus says the way is narrow, you know who he's talking about? Partially. It's John chapter 14. I am the way, the truth, the life. No man comes to the Father except through me. So it's your relationship with Jesus is being in the narrow way. I have several things I guess we could talk about. And that's Matthew chapter 7, 12 through 14. It's what Jesus spoke of. There are things here by comparison. You know that the pathway is small, and you know that the gate is small. You know that there are few people who enter into it. By the way, entering is an action. You have to. It's your choice. You enter into it. It doesn't just fall on you. You willfully follow Christ because you're in love with Christ, because you know who he is, and you follow his ways. There's also the big way. If you choose to do what you want, when you want, how you want, like the rest of the world, then you're walking in the broad path. And you will be entering through the broad gate. And there are going to be a lot of people there with you. But Jesus, narrowing it down to the invitation, after he said all of those great things, which path do you want to be on? And I got to ask you the same thing as well. Whether it be through the mouth of Moses or Joshua or Elijah or Jeremiah or Joel or Jesus or Peter or the apostles or Paul. Got to bring it down to you. Who do you want to follow? Which gate do you want to go through? Which path are you on right now that will lead you to the gate that you're going to go through? Have you ever noticed in this story, there's two paths, and there's two doors, and there's two groups of people. Presumably, both are leading in good places, but they're not. At the beginning of the path, there's no sign that says, this one's going to heaven, this one's going to hell. You and I, we make choices on which path we're going to be on. You and I, individually, can have an intimate relationship with Christ.
Hallelujah.
You and I can fake each other out. You and I look good this morning. Well, for what it's worth. But your soul, your strength in following Christ. That keeps you on the narrow path and through the narrow door. We have choices. We have choices every day. And they play out in everyday life. Reaction, proactive. We have choices every day who we're going to follow. Let's make the choice right now to be on the narrow road with Jesus, an intimate relationship with Him, walking joyfully, happily, rejoicing all the way to heaven. Doesn't that sound good? Doesn't life sound better than death? Doesn't joy sound better than hate? Doesn't light sound better than darkness? It's your choice. It's your choice. Whatever your need is this morning, maybe you want to publicly make a choice. Maybe you want to say that I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and then clothe yourself in baptism and walking with Him, with the Spirit within you, helping you, encouraging you, and equipping you. Maybe you just struggle. Maybe you struggle like I struggle. Maybe you struggle like the Israelites and bouncing back and forth. Maybe you need help keeping your focus. Whatever you need to choose life, don't let pride stand in the way of receiving help. Whatever your needs are this morning,